Chapter 1. The Wastelands Forgotten. The horizon of the Wasteland planet extended endlessly, a desolate sea of cracked earth and fractured stone stretching beneath twin suns, whose relentless glare scorched every living thing beneath their gaze. The air was thick with dust, and the acrid tang of burned metal, stirred constantly by fierce, unpredictable storms that clawed at the barren land like ancient ghosts reclaiming what little remained of a lost world. Amid this brutal and unforgiving landscape, the faintest stir of life struggled beneath a thin blanket of coarse sand, barely clinging to existence. Her body was broken, battered by betrayal and neglect, abandoned by those who had once called her ally and kin. She was a warrior of a proud, ancient race whose legacy had been forged through countless centuries of honor and combat, yet now, she was reduced to a fragile ember barely flickering against the vast, indifferent void. Her breaths came in shallow, ragged gasps, the dry wind searing her throat, while her vision swam between the haze of agony and the distant silhouettes of fading hope. Her hands twitched weakly against the unforgiving ground, fingertips brushing against a handful of rough pebbles, grounding her to the unforgiving reality of this forsaken place. Betrayal was a bitter poison, one Alara had known all too well in the final, desperate days of a brutal war that tore her people apart. The very ones she had trusted, those sworn to her cause, had turned their backs when the tides shifted. When the Dominion forces overwhelmed their defenses, when alliances shattered and loyalty became a luxury none could afford, they cast her aside, left her to perish alone in this wasteland, swallowed slowly by sand and silence. The wounds that marred her skin were not only from the battle, but from the deeper scars of abandonment. The harsh twin suns burned mercilessly, the searing heat relentless in its assault, while the nights plunged into a cold so biting it threatened to freeze the very marrow of her bones. Each day passed like a cruel eternity, yet in the darkest recesses of her fading consciousness, a single thought remained: survival, however improbable, was her last act of defiance. But fate, as it often does in the vast reaches of space, held other plans. Far beyond the ravaged remnants of shattered outposts and broken dreams, a figure appeared on the horizon, a solitary silhouette etched against the blinding glare of the suns, moving steadily, almost deliberately, through the shifting dunes. The man's armor was battered, worn thin by countless campaigns, his face weathered by years of exposure to hostile worlds and merciless suns. This was Captain Jonah Reed, a human whose name was whispered in the undercurrents of frontier settlements and among the scattered bands of freedom fighters. A man whose life was a tapestry of survival, loss, and a stubborn refusal to surrender to the darkness that threatened to engulf the galaxy. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the horizon not just for threats, but for signs of hope, fragments of life in places where all seemed lost. As Jonah drew closer, his gaze fell upon the faint outline of Alara's form half buried in the sand. The warrior's once glorious armor lay battered and tarnished, her weapons scattered and broken beside her. Yet beneath the layers of dust and blood, Jonah saw something that stirred a flicker of something long dormant, a spark of resilience, the unmistakable pulse of life fighting to endure. With practiced efficiency, he approached, kneeling beside her, his hands steady and sure as he assessed her injuries and whispered words of reassurance, a language unfamiliar but laced with the same primal promise of survival. His medical pack was rudimentary but well-stocked with salvaged technanite injectors, biogels, and stimulants designed to stave off death's cold embrace. Gently, he began the painstaking work of stabilizing her, tending to wounds that were as much physical as they were spiritual. Alara's eyes fluttered open, confusion and pain clouding her gaze before recognition slowly dawned. The stranger was not a foe but a lifeline, a fragment of humanity she had never dared hope for in this forsaken wasteland. Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and broken, yet it carried the weight of her long ordeal and the fragile thread of trust she now extended. Why have you come?" she asked, each word a tremor against the vast silence. Jonah's answer was simple but resolute. Because no one deserves to die alone out here. Because sometimes, hope is all that separates us from oblivion. The journey that began on that scorched ground was the first step in a story neither of them could have foreseen. Jonah, the battle-scarred human survivor, and Alara, the fallen warrior of a dying world, forged a bond born from desperation and tempered by the unyielding will to live. Their survival was not just a matter of medicine and shelter, but of trust, the slow, painstaking rebuilding of faith between two souls battered by war and betrayal. As Jonah lifted her into the makeshift cradle of his arms and began the trek toward his battered ship, the Nomad's haven, Alara knew that she was no longer abandoned. She was found. The wastes around them were merciless, a crucible of sand and fire that spared no weakness. Jonah's knowledge of survival was their shield, each step measured against shifting dunes and unseen dangers lurking beneath the surface. The scorching days and freezing nights blurred into a relentless test of endurance. Yet, beneath the stars that wheeled silently overhead, Alara's strength grew not just of body, but of spirit as she learned to lean on Jonah's steady presence. Together, they navigated a landscape hostile to life itself, bound by a growing understanding that transcended words. In the cramped confines of the Nomad's haven, Jonah tended to Alara's wounds with painstaking care, but more importantly, he tended to the fragile spark of hope that still flickered within her. Their conversations were sparse at first, punctuated by long silences and the gentle rhythms of recovery. Yet, in those silences, a connection deepened, a fragile tether pulling two shattered souls towards something new. Alara learned of Jonah's past, a man forged in the crucible of countless lost battles, haunted by memories of comrades fallen and worlds left behind. Jonah learned of Alara's honor-bound heritage, the pride and pain of a civilization on the brink of extinction. The bond they forged was not one born of easy affection or sudden passion, but of shared pain and mutual respect, a promise that neither would face the darkness alone again. Jonah became her protector, her guide, and slowly, something more. And Alara, once left to die on a barren world, found in him the reason to live, to fight for a future neither could yet imagine, but both dared to hope for. As the twin suns set once more on the endless wastes, their silhouettes against the fading light were no longer those of a lone survivor and a forgotten warrior. They were two souls intertwined by fate, bound by a gift neither expected, and a promise that together they would carve a path through the void. The sun's merciless heat beat down relentlessly on the cracked and barren wasteland, a ceaseless blaze that seemed determined to erase all traces of life. Amid the swirling dust and jagged rocks lay Alara, her once proud armor dented and scorched, her body a map of bruises and cuts inflicted not only by the unforgiving terrain, but by the cruel betrayal that had left her here, abandoned to the desert's silent judgment. Her breath came shallow and ragged, lungs burning with each gasp as she fought against the creeping darkness threatening to claim her. Memories flickered like dying embers in her mind, the clash of blades, the screams of comrades, the cold steel of betrayal twisting her fate. She had been a warrior once, a leader who inspired loyalty and fear alike. But that had been before they turned on her, before they sealed her fate with a verdict of death and desertion. Yet, even in this forsaken place, where hope seemed a distant myth, Alara's spirit refused to be extinguished. Somewhere deep within, a fierce ember of defiance smoldered, defying the silence of the wasteland. Her fingers twitched, brushing against the coarse grains of sand, as if willing herself to rise. Her eyes, clouded with pain, caught a flicker of movement on the horizon, a silhouette against the burning sky, slow and deliberate, moving toward her with purpose. The stranger approached cautiously, a man garbed in battered armor etched with the marks of countless battles. His eyes, sharp and watchful, softened as he saw the broken figure before him, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition not just of survival, but of a shared struggle against a universe indifferent to weakness. This was Captain Jonah Reed, a man whose life had been shaped by the very edge of existence. A wanderer among stars, a survivor of wars that scarred planets and souls alike, he had learned to seek the flickers of life in the darkest corners of the galaxy. What he found now was something precious and rare, a warrior left to die, but still breathing, a story unfinished. Without hesitation, Jonah knelt beside Alara, his hands steady as he assessed her injuries, his voice low and reassuring amid the harsh winds. His medical supplies were scarce, salvaged from forgotten outposts and scavenged ships, but his resolve was abundant. With every application of healing gel, every whispered word, he fought against the dying of her light. Alara's consciousness drifted in and out, the pain and exhaustion threatening to claim her, but the stranger's presence anchored her to life. Slowly, she became aware of his steady hands, the warmth of his breath, and the unfamiliar kindness in his eyes. "Why have you come?" she whispered, voice cracked but resolute. Jonah's answer was simple yet profound. It promised to defy the wasteland's cruelty, to fight for life even when the odds were impossible. "Because no one deserves to die alone," he said, lifting her gently. Together, they began the arduous journey back to his ship, a battered vessel known as the Nomad's Haven, a beacon of hope amid the desolation. The trek across the wasteland was a brutal test of endurance. Scorching days melted into freezing nights, and every step was a battle against thirst, exhaustion, and despair. Yet, with Jonah's steadfast guidance and Alara's unyielding will, they persevered. In the solitude of the barren desert, a fragile bond began to form, born of shared struggle and mutual respect. It grew into a connection that neither expected but both desperately needed. Within the battered hull of the Nomad's Haven, far from the judgment of worlds, Alara began to heal not just in body, but in spirit. Jonah's presence was a balm, a reminder that even amidst ruin, life could bloom anew. Together, they faced the ghosts of their pasts, the scars of war and betrayal, and the uncertain future that stretched before them like the endless desert. And as the twin suns set once more over the wasteland planet, they stood united not as savior and rescued, but as partners forging a new destiny against the unforgiving backdrop of the stars. Chapter 2. Sanctuary Amid the Stars. The Nomad's Haven was no palace, it was a patchwork of scavenged technology and worn metal plates, a vessel that had seen the worst of the galaxy's frontier and survived through sheer grit and necessity. Yet within its cramped and humming compartments, it offered something far more precious than comfort or luxury: sanctuary. As Alara slowly regained strength beneath the soft glow of flickering life support monitors and the gentle hum of recycled air, she realized how profoundly her fate had shifted. The wasteland planet, with its scorching suns and merciless storms, had been a crucible designed to extinguish her. But the Nomad's Haven was a womb of rebirth, and Jonah, reed-scarred, taciturn, yet unyieldingly steadfast, was the guardian of this fragile new beginning. Days blurred together in a haze of healing and quiet discovery. Jonah was a man of few words, each carefully measured and deliberate, as if language itself were a tool to be wielded with precision rather than thrown carelessly into the void. His hands were steady as they tended to her wounds, applying biogels and nanite patches that hummed softly as they worked beneath her skin. Yet it was not just the physical care that mattered. It was the quiet presence that spoke volumes, silent vigil through long nights, the steady rhythm of footsteps pacing the narrow corridors, the unspoken promise that she would not face the darkness alone. Alara's mind, once fogged by pain and exhaustion, began to clear like the dawn breaking over a bleak horizon. The warrior within stirred cautiously, tempered by the harsh lessons of betrayal and loss, but unwilling to yield. She watched Jonah as he moved about the ship, grasping at control panels, repairing worn circuits, adjusting navigation arrays, and she saw a reflection of her own resolve. This man, a human from a world far removed from her own, was a survivor, a fighter, and unexpectedly, a kindred spirit. In the vast loneliness of space, their paths had converged, two souls cast adrift who found in each other the fragile tether of hope. Their conversations were initially halting, cautious explorations of shared histories and unspoken wounds. Jonah spoke of the wars that had shaped him, battles lost and won, comrades fallen beneath alien suns. He carried memories like scars etched deep, silent testaments to endurance. Alara, in turn, revealed fragments of her own story, a proud heritage torn asunder by the merciless advance of the Dominion, the betrayal that had left her stranded and forsaken on a hostile world. She spoke of honor, loyalty, and the devastating cost of broken oaths. In these exchanges, their differences species, culture, language seemed less a chasm and more a challenge to bridge with patience and empathy. The physical confines of the nomad's haven fostered an intimacy born of necessity. Space was limited, privacy a rare commodity. Yet within these constraints, they found moments of connection, a shared meal in the cramped galley illuminated by flickering consoles, a quiet vigil beneath the artificial stars projected on the ceiling, laughter shared at rare moments of levity amid hardship. Each gesture, each glance, became a thread weaving a tapestry of trust. It was a slow, deliberate process, a dance of respect and vulnerability where the stakes were nothing less than survival and redemption. Alara learned the rhythms of human behavior, the subtle inflections of speech, the unspoken codes of body language, the ways in which trust was extended and tested. Jonah, in turn, absorbed the sacred customs of her people, rituals of respect and honor, the profound significance they placed on connection and community. They shared stories under the dim glow of the ship's soft lighting, bridging worlds with words and gestures, building a sanctuary not just of shelter, but of understanding. Yet the galaxy beyond their fragile refuge was not still. The Dominion's shadow loomed large, a relentless force intent on crushing rebellion and dissent. Their betrayal of Alara was a calculated act, meant to extinguish hope and send a message. But the discovery of her survival, and the unlikely alliance with Jonah, would not go unnoticed. Across the stars, whispers spread of a warrior reclaimed from the dead, of a human who defied the void to offer salvation. These rumors stirred unease among Dominion commanders and hope among the scattered resistance alike. One evening, as the nomad's haven drifted silently through the star-studded void, Jonah and Alara stood side by side on the ship's observation deck. The vastness of space stretched infinitely before them, a canvas of light and shadow that reflected the complexity of their own journey. The twin suns of the Wasteland planet were distant now, mere pinpricks of warmth swallowed by the cold dark. Yet in that moment, the cold void felt less vast, less isolating. Their fingers brushed, a gentle touch that spoke of beginnings of trust earned, walls lowered, and a future uncertain, yet filled with promise. Alara's voice broke the silence, soft but steady. You saved me when all others left me to die. But you have given me more than life, you have given me a choice. Jonah met her gaze, understanding the weight of those words. Their bond was no longer forged solely in survival, but in something deeper, a union of purpose, respect, and something that stirred quietly between them, fragile and beautiful. The journey ahead was daunting. They would face enemies who sought to tear them apart, worlds divided by fear and suspicion, and the ever-present danger of betrayal. But together, they embodied a defiance that transcended flesh and blood. In the unlikeliest of alliances, a human and a forsaken warrior was the seed of a new hope, a beacon for those lost in the dark. As the nomad's haven sailed on through the silent sea of stars, carrying two souls bound by fate and fire, the galaxy watched, waiting to see if this gift found in the wasteland might one day change everything. Chapter 3: The Trials of Trust and Fire. The endless expanse of space outside the nomad's haven was an indifferent canvas, glittering with distant stars and swirling nebulae. Yet within the ship's cramped and humming interior, a storm of transformation was quietly unfolding. The fragile sanctuary Jonah had carved from rusted metal and scavenged tech had become more than a shelter for Alara. It was a crucible where the past and future collided, where scars both visible and hidden were laid bare in the presence of a man who had once been a stranger. Every inch of the ship bore witness to their journey. The faint smell of healing balms, the soft glow of patched systems, the quiet cadence of two souls learning to navigate the treacherous terrain of trust and intimacy. Alara's body had begun to heal, the deep wounds mending beneath the ministrations of nanite-infused gels and biostabilizers. Yet it was the wounds within that proved most challenging. Years of battle and betrayal had sculpted her into a warrior of unparalleled strength, but strength that came at the cost of vulnerability, the cost of closing herself off to the very connection that might redeem her. To allow another so close, to trust someone with the fragile core of her being, was a risk she had been trained to avoid. Yet, Jonah's steady presence, his quiet determination to protect and understand, began to chip away at the walls she had built. Each shared meal, each quiet conversation under the simulated stars of the observation deck, wove threads of empathy and hope that threatened to unravel the loneliness that had shadowed her life. Jonah himself was no stranger to pain and loss. His past was a tapestry of scars, some physical, others etched deep into the soul. He had been forged in the crucible of countless battles, each one leaving a mark that both hardened and humbled him. Yet, in Alara, he saw something more than a fallen warrior. He saw a reflection of his own struggles, a kindred spirit fighting not just external enemies but the ghosts of the past. Their shared silences spoke volumes, moments where words were unnecessary, where presence itself was the language of healing. The distance between human and alien, survivor and savior, began to dissolve in these intimate exchanges. But the galaxy beyond the Nomad's haven was not silent. The Dominion's shadow stretched wide and dark, a reminder that their fragile peace was but a momentary reprieve in a relentless war. News of Alara's survival and her alliance with a human spread like wildfire among factions hungry for advantage or revenge. Spies and mercenaries prowled the outer systems, and the threat of attack hung like a storm cloud ready to break. Jonah and Alara knew that their sanctuary could be shattered at any moment, and the burden of preparing for that day weighed heavily on them both. Amidst these external pressures, their personal journey deepened. The rituals of trust that Sarina had spoken of, though from a different world, found echoes in the growing bond between Jonah and Alara. The simple acts of touch, once fraught with hesitation, became affirmations of connection. A hand resting on a shoulder, a brush of fingers in the dim light, each gesture a step toward healing and hope. Yet, beneath these tender moments, the specter of doubt lingered. Would the wounds of betrayal ever truly heal? Could trust forged in the crucible of hardship withstand the coming trials? One night, as the Nomad's haven drifted quietly through a starfield streaked with cosmic dust, Jonah and Alara stood together on the observation deck, the silence between them rich with unspoken emotion. Alara's eyes shimmered with a mixture of fear and determination as she finally spoke the question that had long weighed on her heart. How do you face a future when the past claws at every step? Jonah's response was gentle but resolute. By choosing each day to stand here, with you, to build something stronger than the shadows that chase us. Their shared resolve was soon tested. An alarm blared through the ship, a harsh reminder that peace was fleeting. Sensors picked up the approach of a Dominion patrol vessel, sleek and deadly, intent on reclaiming what they considered lost. The Nomad's haven shuddered under the power of its engines as Jonah and Alara prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The battle that followed was fierce, a deadly dance of strategy and survival amid the void. But it was not just weapons that were tested, it was the bond between them, forged in trust and tempered by fire. As the Dominion ship was driven away, retreating into the black, Jonah and Alara realized that their fight was far from over. Yet, in the aftermath, they found strength in each other, a determination that no force could easily break. Their story, a tale of survival, trust, and unexpected love, was becoming a beacon for others lost in the darkness, a testament to the power of resilience and connection. Together, they prepared to face whatever the galaxy might throw at them, bound not just by necessity, but by a profound, unspoken promise that no matter the wasteland they crossed, no matter the storms ahead, they would face them as one. Chapter 4, Forged in Fire and Stars. The void beyond the battered hull of the Nomad's haven stretched infinitely, a vast, unyielding sea of black punctuated by the cold glimmers of distant suns and swirling nebulae. Within the sanctuary of their ship, Jonah and Alara stood at the crossroads of a destiny neither had chosen but both had embraced. The countless miles they had traveled from that barren wasteland planet, the fierce battles fought and won, the nights spent under alien skies, sharing whispered dreams and fears, all had led them to this fragile moment of reckoning. The galaxy awaited them, a canvas vast beyond reckoning, a crucible of empires and outcasts, where the spark they had ignited might yet grow into a conflagration that could challenge the darkness itself. Alara's body, once broken and beaten beneath the scorching suns of the wasteland, was now a living testament to resilience. The scars she bore told stories of survival and strength, yet it was the fire in her eyes, the fierce determination tempered by newfound trust, that spoke most powerfully of her transformation. Jonah, the battle-hardened human captain who had plucked her from death's shadow, had become more than savior. He was her anchor, her partner in a journey that transcended worlds and bloodlines. Together, they navigated the intricate dance of cultures and emotions, learning that love, like survival, was forged in the fire of vulnerability and courage. Their bond had become a beacon amid the fractured political landscape of the Outer Rim. News of their alliance, once whispered in the shadows of rebel enclaves and Dominion strongholds alike, had spread like wildfire, an emblem of hope to some, a threat to others. The Dominion, relentless in their pursuit of control, saw Alara not merely as a fugitive or a trophy, but as a symbol of defiance that could galvanize the scattered resistance. They dispatched hunters and assassins, relentless in their quest to extinguish the ember that threatened to ignite rebellion across the stars. Within the cramped and humming corridors of the Nomad's Haven, Jonah and Alara prepared for the inevitable storm. Every sensor sweep, every tactical briefing was underscored by the knowledge that their sanctuary was but a fragile bubble in a galaxy ruled by fire and steel. Yet, amid the preparations, they found strength not only in weaponry and strategy, but in each other, a bond that had become their greatest shield. Their nights were filled with quiet conversations beneath the artificial stars projected on the observation dome. Moments where the universe seemed to hold its breath, where trust was spoken not in words but in the gentle touch of hands and the shared warmth of presence. One evening, as the ship drifted near the edge of a volatile star system, Alara stood gazing out into the swirling nebulae, colors bleeding into one another in a cosmic dance of light and shadow. Jonah approached quietly, his voice a low murmur. "You've come so far from the wasteland to the stars, and yet, your fire burns brighter than ever." Alara turned, eyes shimmering with emotion, and took his hand, the connection electric and grounding all at once. "It is because I am no longer alone," she replied. "Because we faced the darkness together." Their journey was soon tested. A Dominion task force emerged from hyperspace, sleek warships bristling with lethal arrays, intent on claiming Alara and crushing the rebellion in one decisive blow. The Nomad's Haven shuddered under the assault as energy beams scorched its hull, alarms blaring a cacophony of warnings. But Jonah's command was calm and unwavering. Shields engaged, weapons primed. The battle that followed was a tempest of light and fury, a desperate gambit that pushed the ship and crew to the brink. Alara fought alongside Jonah, her warrior's instincts honed and sharpened by every hardship endured. Together, they orchestrated maneuvers that danced between destruction and salvation, weaving through the void with a deadly grace. The fight was not only for survival, but for the future, the fragile hope that had been ignited on that wasteland planet and nurtured through pain and perseverance. Each victory was a testament to their unity, a strike against the darkness threatening to consume them. When the last Dominion vessel fled, crippled and broken, silence settled over the battered ship. Exhausted but unbroken, Jonah and Alara stood together amid the wreckage and glow of failing systems, their hands finding one another in the dim light. In that moment, the galaxy seemed to pause, acknowledging the triumph not just of weapons or tactics, but of love and resilience. The journey ahead remained perilous. The galaxy's vast tapestry was woven with conflict and hope, shadows and light intertwined. But within the heart of the Nomad's Haven, within the unyielding bond of two souls who had defied fate and forged their own path, a new legend was born. The story of a warrior left for dead on a wasteland planet, and the human who found her, who made her his, was no longer just a tale of survival. It was a beacon of possibility, a promise that even in the darkest reaches, the light of hope could never be extinguished. Together, they sailed onward, a living testament to the power of trust, love, and the unbreakable will to rise from the ashes and claim the stars. The cosmos stretched endlessly before them, a vast sea of stars that shimmered like distant promises, cold and indifferent. Yet within the heart of the Nomad's Haven, a different kind of light burned fiercely. It was the light born of survival, of hard-won trust, and of a bond that had blossomed in the most inhospitable of places, a bond that now challenged the very darkness that sought to consume them. Alara, once a warrior abandoned beneath the twin suns of a barren wasteland, had been transformed not only by Jonah's hands, but by the quiet power of love and acceptance. No longer broken, she was whole in ways neither had dared hope. Their journey through the void had tested every fiber of their beings, battles fought in starfields, alliances forged and shattered, moments of despair and hope intertwined like the constellations that danced beyond their ship. Yet through it all, their connection deepened. A silent promise forged in shared danger, whispered hopes, and the quiet strength found in holding onto one another amid chaos. They were no longer merely survivor and savior. They were partners, bound by an unspoken vow to face whatever the galaxy hurled at them together. But the galaxy did not relent. The Dominion's shadow loomed larger with each passing cycle, their thirst for control unquenched, their vengeance fierce. Intelligence reports spoke of fleets gathering, of warships bristling with weapons designed to crush rebellion beneath iron fists. The Nomad's haven became a beacon for the scattered resistance, a symbol of defiance and hope that drew allies and enemies alike. And amid this maelstrom of politics and war, Jonah and Alara stood as pillars of resilience, a living testament that even in the darkest void, light could thrive. One fateful day, as the ship navigated the treacherous passages near a volatile nebula, alarms blared, a sudden and brutal assault by Dominion forces intent on erasing the flicker of rebellion once and for all. The battle was fierce and unrelenting. Energy weapons flared like novas against the cold blackness. The Nomad's haven shuddered under the onslaught. Jonah's voice was steady as he commanded defenses, his strategic mind weaving through chaos. Alara fought beside him, a whirlwind of strength and precision, her warrior's instincts honed by every hardship survived. Together, they moved as one defender and fighter, protector and heart. Amid the fury, a critical hit breached the ship's hull. Alarms screamed as atmosphere bled into the void, systems faltered, and lives hung in the balance. In the chaos, Jonah and Alara fought their way to the control deck, rallying crew and allies with fierce determination. The battle was not just for survival, but for the future, a future their bond symbolized and made possible. When the last Dominion ship was driven back, broken and retreating, silence fell like a benediction. The Nomad's haven bore scars, but it floated resilient, a ship and crew forged anew by fire. Jonah and Alara stood together amid the wreckage, breathless but unbowed. Their hands found one another's in the dim glow, the simple touch a profound declaration that no darkness could sever. In the quiet that followed, as systems hummed softly and stars twinkled through shattered viewports, they allowed themselves to envision a future once unimaginable. A future where the shadows of betrayal and abandonment no longer defined them, where love was a weapon as potent as any forged in war. Their story, born in the wasteland, tempered in battle, and sustained by trust, had become a beacon. A beacon for those lost in the void, for those who dared to dream of a galaxy where hope was not extinguished by fear. As the Nomad's haven charted a course toward the distant reaches of rebel space, Alara and Jonah stood side by side on the observation deck, gazing into the infinite night. The stars above whispered ancient secrets and endless possibilities, a cosmic symphony that echoed the rhythm of their hearts. Together, they faced the unknown not as broken souls adrift, but as united beings, forged in fire and bound by love. And in that unity, they found their true strength, the power to rise, to fight, to heal, and to claim the stars as their own.